Welcome back, everybody. We've got a really interesting deep dive for you today. We're going to be looking at how numerology can shape a person's life.
And their generosity, which I think some people might find a little bit surprising.
Yeah, I think so too. It's not something you hear about every day, right? Using like lucky numbers to, you know, uh, decide how much to donate to charity.
It definitely piqued my curiosity when I first saw the source material.
Okay, so let's set the stage a little bit here. The person we're going to be talking about today, they're very much rooted in Chinese culture.
And in Chinese culture, numerology is a really big deal.
It is, yeah. Certain numbers like 6, 8, and 9 that they're considered like super lucky.
Yeah, they're believed to attract wealth and good fortune.
And this person, I mean, they take it to a whole other level. They've arranged their whole life around these numbers, like everything.
So before we get into the specifics, maybe we should give our listeners a quick numerology 101.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Basically, it's the belief that numbers have like symbolic meanings and that they can actually influence events in our lives.
Which I think a lot of people can relate to on some level. Like, I know I have a lucky number.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so this person, their sources, they're just full of examples of how they use these lucky numbers. Like their house number, it has to be a combination of 6, 8, and 9. And if it's not, well, they just won't live there.
Wow.
Right. They even talked about driving around a parking lot until they find a spot with one of their lucky numbers.
That's commitment.
Yeah.
But, it also makes you think about, it makes you think about why people do these kinds of things.
Totally. I mean, are they just superstitious? Or is there like a deeper human need at play here?
I think it's definitely more than just superstition. I mean, we humans, we're always trying to find patterns and meaning, especially in a world that can feel so chaotic and random.
It's like we want to believe we have some control over things, even if it's just through something like picking a lucky number. So does this kind of thinking actually work? Like if you focus on these so-called lucky occurrences, does it really make you luckier?
That's a great question, and it's something that psychologists have actually studied. There's this thing called confirmation bias, which is basically our tendency to notice and favor information that confirms our existing beliefs.
So like if you think 8 is your lucky number and you have a good day, you might be more likely to notice all the 8s around you and think, see, it's working.
Yeah, and on the flip side, if you have a bad day, you probably won't even register the 8s, or you'll just dismiss them as coincidence.
It's like our brains are filtering information to fit our narrative.
Pretty much. But, even if it is just a matter of perception, there could still be some real benefits to this kind of thinking. I mean, focusing on the positive, even if it's tied to something as seemingly arbitrary as a number, well, it can lead to a more optimistic outlook.
And that could have like a ripple effect on all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so where it gets really interesting for me is that this person, they don't just want to keep their luck to themselves. They actually want to use it to help others.
Yes. They have this really strong desire to give back to the world. And that's where I think this deep dive takes a really interesting turn.
It's kind of like they believe their good fortune is something that needs to be shared.
Yeah, that really stood out to me too when I was reading through their stuff. It's like they see it as almost an obligation.
Like a responsibility that comes with being lucky.
Exactly.
Interesting. So how does this giving back actually work? Like what causes are they into?
Well, they're really passionate about animal welfare, specifically no-kill shelters.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, they're really drawn to that. And they've talked a lot about wanting to support shelters in Asia,
Oh, yeah, they mentioned that a few times. Why Asia specifically, I wonder?
I think they feel like those shelters, sometimes they don't get as much attention.
It's like they fly under the radar.
Yeah, kind of. And they also talked about some of the cultural challenges these shelters face.
I remember them mentioning that, like limited funding and even like negative perceptions of animal welfare in some communities.
Right. It's not always easy for those organizations to get the support they need.
So how does the numerology tie into all of this?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. They've actually come up with a way to use their lucky numbers to encourage other people to donate.
Okay, I'm really curious to hear about this.
So get this. They're talking about making donations in amounts that correspond to their lucky number combinations.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like donating $688 or even donating, say, like sets of 8 items or something. Always tying it back to those numbers.
Wow. It's like they're trying to make like a game out of giving. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And actually, there's a lot of research out there about how adding like elements of fun or gamification to things can actually make people more likely to participate.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, think about all those apps and stuff that use points and rewards to motivate people.
Yeah, it's the same kind of principle, right? People are more inclined to do something if it feels engaging or if there's a sense of like positive reinforcement.
And this person, they're like basically applying that same logic to charitable giving.
Right. And they're also tying it into this idea of like sharing their good fortune.
And creating good karma for themselves in the process, right?
Exactly. They believe that by helping others, they're also in a way helping themselves. That it will kind of like protect their own luck.
It's an interesting perspective. So I'm curious, what is karma exactly? I mean, I've heard the word, obviously, but I'm not sure I really understand it.
Yeah, it's one of those concepts that can be a little tricky to wrap your head around.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, essentially, karma is this idea that every action has a consequence. It's kind of like a universal balance sheet, you know?
Okay. I think I'm starting to get it.
Like when you do good things, you accumulate positive karma. And when you do bad things, well, you accumulate negative karma.
And it all comes back to you eventually, right?
That's a basic idea, yeah.
So this person believes that their giving is a way to ensure they stay on the right side of the karma ledger.
Yeah, it's like they're making a cosmic investment in their own well-being.
That's actually kind of a beautiful way to think about it when you put it like that.
It is, isn't it?
But even setting aside the whole karma thing, there's no denying that giving back has its own rewards, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's so much research now about the psychological benefits of altruism. It can actually make you happier and healthier.
No kidding.
Yeah, for real. When you help others, your brain releases all these feel-good chemicals like endorphins.
Just like a natural high?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, giving can also foster this sense of purpose and connection, which is huge for our well-being.
So even if you don't buy into the whole karma thing, there are still some very real and very tangible benefits to giving back.
Totally. It's a win-win situation. You get to make a difference in the world, and you get a boost to your own happiness and well-being. What's not to love?
It makes you wonder if this person's approach could actually inspire others to be more generous.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. Like, maybe seeing someone donate in such a specific and quirky way, it could spark something in other people.
Like, hey, if that person can do it, maybe I can too.
Exactly. It could kind of break down some of the barriers people might have around giving.
And, I mean, regardless of whether you believe in numerology or karma or any of that, if it leads to more people getting involved in charitable causes, that's a good thing, right?
Absolutely. The more people we can get engaged in giving back, the better off we'll all be.
So I guess the question is, does this person's method actually work?
Well, that's a question for the ages, isn't it? I mean, how can you really measure the impact of something like this?
Yeah, true. But it's definitely food for thought.
It is, for sure. And I think that's one of the things that makes this deep dive so fascinating.
I agree.
It's challenging us to think about generosity in a new way.
And to maybe question some of our own assumptions about why we give and how we give.
You got it. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to bring it back to the listener.
You're right. This has been a really interesting conversation, but what does it all mean for the person listening at home?
Well, we've heard how this person uses numerology to kind of fuel their generosity.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique approach.
It is.
Yeah.
But now I'm curious, what about our listeners? I mean, do you have any like personal beliefs or practices that influence how you give back?
It could be anything, really.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
maybe there's a specific holiday that always inspires you to donate,
Or maybe you have a family tradition of volunteering.
or even like a personal experience that's really shaped how you think about compassion.
Yeah, something like that.
And, you know, thinking back to what we were talking about earlier with the lucky numbers, if you could pick a lucky number to guide your giving, what would it be?
It'd have to be a number that means something to you. Yeah, like maybe it reminds you of a happy memory, or it just gives you a good feeling.
And then how would you use that number to inspire your giving?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Maybe you donate that amount to a cause you care about,
Ooh, I like that.
or maybe you volunteer for that many hours.
Or you could even get creative and like come up with some other way to connect the number to your giving.
Yeah, the sky's the limit.
I think the takeaway here is that, giving doesn't have to be like this serious, rigid thing.
Totally. It can be fun.
Exactly. You can be creative with it. You can personalize it. You can even, inject a little bit of, well, I don't want to say superstition.
It's more like intentionality, right?
Yeah, that's a better word.
Like you're imbuing your giving with an extra layer of meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And hey, maybe by doing that, by making it more personal and meaningful, we can actually inspire ourselves to give even more.
And inspire others, too.
That's a great point. All right, everybody, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Hopefully we've given you some new things to think about.
Yeah, and maybe even inspired you to try out some new ways of giving back.
Until next time, keep those wheels turning. And remember, generosity can take many forms.
And that's a wrap.